Welcome back, everyone, to Merge Conflict, the most productive, modern, secure, performant release of Merge Conflict to date. How we doing?
That that sounded very Apple-y. Are we an Apple podcast? I mean, normally we're an Apple podcast, but not this week, James. We're not an Apple podcast, even though shades of Apple do occur in random places. Should we get into it? What week is it?
Do tell Frank Kruger. Before you get into this, if you're joining us for the very first time in the first 30 seconds, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and follow us on YouTube, youtube.com/as Merge Conflict FM. You can see the faces of Frank and James in real time.
Well, James, like I promised, I woke up late.
Nice.
.NET Week. It's .NET Week, everyone. Bells, whistles, flashes. Was. I'm really high. Hi, it's the future. It's future Frank. Well, in the past, I slept in. So at 8:06 a.m., I tuned into the .NET Conf keynote. And what did I see? I saw my buddy, friend of the show, James, just prancing around outside Microsoft, doing what I will, and I mean this generously, say, a good Tim Cook impression. I know that's not exactly what it was. There was still James there, but the delivery, the walking around, I don't know. It was a very Tim Cook intro. That's the shades of Apple I was alluding to. We got to it very quickly. Hi, James, Mr. James.
Yeah. So if people haven't, we've been talking about .NET 9 for a while. Second Tuesday of every November, release of .NET. .NET 9 is out. Yes, it's the biggest and boldest release of .NET yet, because it's every release of .NET. You know what I mean? Which is obviously fantastic. I think what's been really cool about .NET Conf and each release in the last several years is sort of how the keynote and how the day has evolved. And then, obviously .NET Conf itself, when it was the ASP Net Conf way back in the day, and evolved into .NET Conf and evolved. And yeah, it's like really evolved.
I didn't remember that history. Sorry.
Yeah, there's like a whole I didn't even know it as well. Like, a lot of my team members like Jeff and John have been around since the days of yore. And, I think Miguel and I were part of one of the early keynotes where we just kind of popped up and we're like, hey, we're here. And welcome to our session, It's been fun to see it evolve over the time. 2 years ago for .NET 7, that was more of the, it sort of evolved into a little bit higher, I would say higher, not necessarily higher production value. I think the production value is always high, but a little bit more the curated keynote experience. Last year was the first year that was a pre-record keynote. And if you remember, Damien was Garava kind of was the opener, and then Damien was the MC that kind of ushered between the different segments. And that was cool because it was in a bunch of different Microsoft buildings as an experiment. And this year, I felt like the cool part is that I've been back to campus a few times, and they finished this bridge that connects each side of the campus. It's this beautiful bridge, and it looks like circus tents, but the tents are inverted because they capture water and they feed all the plants, or they water all the plants, I should say, around you. So it's really cool how it's set up. And it's a very long walk, actually, if you were to walk across, a good 5 to 10 minutes at normal pace. I just thought this bridge was super just amazing. They're connecting all the new buildings to the other side, which is where the Commons is at. And I didn't really think much about this year. I was helping John and everyone else on the team with the keynote, and I've been participating in the keynote for several years. And I happened to just be flying up one of these during the week for 36 hours, and for a meeting, a leadership meeting, extended leadership meeting. I'm not part of the leadership team, but the extended leadership team meeting. And 2 weeks before, I think Maddie and John and someone else on the team they were at some conference together, and they were talking about the keynote, and they're like, well, we need someone to open. And when are we going to record this thing? And then someone's like, I think John was like, oh, James is going to be on campus. We should just have him do it. So I just randomly got signed up for it to do the.
You got volunteered.
It's been
volunteered. Yeah,
I've been voluntold, I believe, is what we like to call it. Now, that being said, what I think my teammates didn't know was that this has sort of been a lifelong dream since I joined Microsoft.
You take it seriously.
Is to kind of keynote a .NET Conf and be like the opener and give this message. And
not technically the opener, sir. I believe there were two people sitting on a bench that were technically the openers.
Yes,
but they didn't give you a very good intro. They just kind of like, oh, who's this guy? And then they walked off.
We've had this, many viewers may know if you watch .NET Conf, because Hunter used to like always open up everything, obviously, and then Gaurav did after that, and Hunter like always wanted to have like these cameos in the keynote. So like last year he would be like randomly like butting in or like randomly walking through a hallway or like waving in the background. It's fun stuff, right? You got to inject some fun into it. So that was really neat, and we were getting together and what are we going to do? So we planned this little like opening and closer, which is kind of cool. Yeah, so it's super neat.
We have to do a little behind the scenes because my imagination just ran wild as I watched you walk on this thing. In fact, I didn't know it was the new bridge. I thought it was the old bridge. And I'm like, did he do some kind of like AI trick here and extend that bridge? Like, no, it's just giant, this new bridge.
It's huge.
So I'm curious, when you're scouting locations, did you wonder how many minutes can I get out of this bridge? Did you walk fast? Did you walk slow? Because I felt like you were doing a little bit of a runway walk in a few parts. So how many times did you walk that bridge to decide how many words that you could speak?
So we did only 2 takes of the whole thing.
Nice. Good.
So I had memorized the entirety of the opening of the keynote. Yes and no. So I had Maddie was helping out. This is like behind the scenes. I have like a photo of it. And Apple does behind the scenes.
I love behind the scenes. Come on.
So Maddie, I have a teleprompter app on my iPad, and it auto scrolls. So I had Maddie who was walking with Cameron and David besides Cameron by the big camera mount. But for my wedding, remember Cameron with the mount? He did the
proper camera. Nice.
Yeah, he had a red camera. Yeah,
cool.
And 8K. Yeah, crazy, very heavy. And so Maddie was holding up the teleprompter, but I was only using it for like sort of glancing on occasion because I knew slides would come up
in case you're
yeah. So they ended up. So we did. We walked pretty slow because Cameron was walking backwards. So if I was walking if I'm walking normal pace, 5 to 7 minutes across this bridge.
It's a big bridge. Okay.
It's a big bridge. At this pace, it would took about 20 minutes to get across the bridge, I would say. I was walking.
So you had plenty of time.
Plenty of time. Now, of course, it's complicated. A lot of people walking, right? But that's all in real time. So what you saw there is one take. So that was one. That was the first take I did, and it was one consecutive take across the entirety.
So much worse, huh? You tripped. People kept bumping into you.
I don't think they edited the second take in. I think the second take was a little bit better. Maybe they sliced it. Maybe it was half and half. I'm not positive. We only did one opening though. That was the only problem. Is we only did one opening because after I did the first opening, then Scott and Gaurav left, so we couldn't do the opening again. But yeah, so I think it was great because
funny.
I was definitely inspired by a lot of the Apple keynotes, but then also just other keynotes. I spent a lot of time watching keynotes and to figure out messaging and things like that. And the cool part is that this bridge is really brand new. It only opened this year fully, and the campus isn't even completely done. So we got cool drone footage, as you saw in the very beginning, which was really neat to have zooming in on it, which was kind of Apple-esque in a way, very neat. But I think, and I told everyone, I said, I want .NET to be the first team to record something on this in the entire company record on this new bridge. I think we are. I haven't seen it anywhere else. I think it's so cool. It's just a beautiful
If you're
backdrop.
just tuning in, this is the Bridge podcast. We are in love with this new bridge.
It's so cool. It's
Okay,
beautiful.
but you did say words, and some of those words involve .NET, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure what you said. I was mostly paying attention to you. Um, but it did lead into a good conference that, of course, I watched in little bits and pieces on YouTube because that is my way. But life is good that way. I do want to make one complaint. I do wish you hosted the videos in a place other than YouTube. YouTube's wonderful. Love YouTube. Hi, everyone on YouTube. But not always accessible from everything.
Well, I'm glad that you say that, because in addition to them being on YouTube, they're also available on Microsoft Learn, where you can get those videos.
I was trying to find that link. Yeah, you gotta put that on. You gotta put that on the conference page. Gotta put that link on the conference page. Yeah.
We will. Yeah.
Fantastic.
So that's nice because they're accessible in different orders, but then obviously anywhere where YouTube's not available as well. And then obviously we shouldn't have ads anyways, but then these are just like the raw footage that's out there, which is really nice. So
plus, I'm just a weirdo. I like to download videos and put them on things so I can watch them later.
Yeah,
I'm just a weirdo. Like to download.
Well, let's get into .NET 9. Yeah, .NET Conf was there. It was, I mean, the keynote was an hour and 5 minutes, which is cool, covering a whole bunch of stuff. I was a very tiny part of it, by the way. I was only 1/10 of the entirety of
no live coding, right? Or did I tune out? Did you do any coding on screen? No, just walking, right?
I only walked.
I walked.
Fantastic.
You've really upgraded in life.
Yes, I did no coding. No, there was plenty of live coding after that with Aspire and Maui and ASP.NET Core and AI stuff and all sorts of goodies, and new Copilot stuff in Visual Studio, of course, alongside .NET 9 bits and pieces, and of course a beautiful blog post as well, the announcing .NET 9 blog post that's out there. All sorts of goodies that's there. What did you think in general? Did you like my walk? Did you like the rest of the keynote? Like, what did you watch the rest of the conference?
I failed to compliment your walk. This whole run up was me complimenting your walk.
I think one person on Twitter, Tim Hewer, who I work with, gave me a compliment. So that was positive. So I was like, thanks, Tim. Appreciate that.
Oh, you texted me. Twitter. See, I don't bother to put things on Twitter about you anymore because you don't exist on the Twitter.
I was monitoring at work #.NETConf during the conference, and we're fixing a few things up in the blog, basically, and that was the only reason I was there. But no, I now have a Blue Sky account, which I also won't monitor. So there's that.
Another service. Okay. Yeah. Do you want to go by like? I just know it by the sessions. That's how I think in terms of everything. So the big announcements: .NET 9, hello, new version. .NET 6, dead. You're dead to all of us. C# 13, it's up to 13 now. I actually do want to talk about those things.
F# 9.
What do you think though was you know me. You know probably which sessions I watched. Probably which order. What do you think was the first session I watched in the grand .NET Conf?
I'd imagine you'd probably
announcing what?
I thought maybe you'd go with the performance improvements part with Tobe. You get a little Tobe in there first. That would be my first impression. Then I think maybe you could have watched Emo and Rich on the SDK libraries and runtime because you love low level shenanigans. But then, it's like Mads and Dustin's also positive. And maybe you went Maui like fourth with Rachel and David. I don't know. Sanderson, did you do a Sanderson AI? I don't know. Maybe I don't know how much on the Aspire train you are. You know what I mean?
Did Sanderson do an AI? I might have missed that one, but you're close. AI was my very first one. Okay. I had to check it out because this was actually chatted a little bit about on Twitter. There, I don't know what .NET's been getting like tensors and stuff for a while now. Was it 7 or 8 or something like that? And we had talked before. You had built like a little AI chat client or something like that. And you had mentioned you used, and gosh, I'm sorry, I'm struggling. What is the tool everyone uses? Semantic, what's
Kernel.
it called? Semantic kernel.
Yep.
You had used that. And one interesting thing I pulled out of the entire discussion you had talking about using, I'm like, oh, it abstracts services? That's nice. I wish I actually had something that abstracted services, because I do like to try different models and things like that. And so the first thing I kind of tuned into, which is hilarious because I'm probably not going to use it in reality, like in my apps or anything, but maybe we'll see, was a new abstraction they have for interfacing with chat AIs. And you're like, yeah, anyone can write that interface. And yes, I agree. Anyone can write that interface. What's important is it's in the box now.
Yeah.
So whenever you want to write a new client or something against a new model, however you access it, you can implement that client using this interface. But far more importantly, if you want to write high level AI stuff, where you're like keeping histories and you're mixing and matching bits and pieces here or there, you want to have a simple low level thing that does your text processing and all of that. And it's nice to have low level things standardized. And that's what you get when they put it in the box. So it's a very simple interface. It's like iChat client or something silly like that. And
Yeah.
it's got like 4 methods, like complete with stream, fail in an obnoxious way, and some other random one I don't fully understand. But it's a very simple interface. But what I like is it's that common base from which we can all start building more advanced things. Because please don't write another chat interface to a chat model. Build higher level abstractions that use it in interesting ways, and use this as the low level interface to access those models.
Yeah.
And what it accesses, like some Azure stuff and some OpenAI stuff, whatever. People will release NuGets and hopefully it'll
Yep.
access everything.
Yeah, that's the idea. There's Microsoft Extensions AI and Microsoft Extensions Vector Data, and I think they're coming out with some new ones as well. I don't know by the time this podcast comes out, but the whole idea is standardizing this across the board so developers learn one API, but also easier for library creators, right? So like Olama Sharp, for example, has already integrated it, and this is sort of a complement to semantic kernel as well. And like basically, this team worked with the semantic kernel team to come up with this. Now, semantic kernel may then introduce on top of it with those extensions and middleware, a whole bunch of other things that they may do in an interface with Gemini and all these other things, and have other things on top of it. But there's still this common layer that provides that unified layer. And we love unified layers of abstractions. Frank, I don't know if you know, we're big in the Maui world and the Xamarin world. That's our jam.
T-shirt.
But yeah, it's like, I think the cool part is Maria opened up with the keynote before Steve did a demo of this stuff and talked about the AI ecosystem, right? And it's like you got semantic kernel, Azure OpenAI, AI search, AI interface, the OpenAI library, Llama parse, GitHub models, Quadrant, Pinecone, Milvus, right? You have all these smart components. Like, you don't want to learn 18 different APIs. You want to learn one. You want to plug into these ecosystems at a high level, and you can do that basically with these, which is really neat. And I think that is sort of like the dream. I think, with C# and .NET, right? It's really about, I think more than anything, especially like in this keynote and in the .NET 9, and this thing is really infusing your existing apps with AI, and how do you simplify that in meaningful ways? So like these building blocks hopefully will enable more scenarios for more people to do cool things with all these new AI services that are out there, and more AI services easily adopt and get into the .NET ecosystem.
Yeah, and I hope to encourage them too, because this interface is nice, but these models are way more advanced these days. So it'd be nice to have an even slightly more complicated interface that allows low-level things, like really accessing how these models really work. But this is a great start because, like I said, we should be raising the level of abstraction. So this is why it was the first video I tuned into, because I was hoping that's what it was going to be, and that's what it was.
Yeah,
So
good
job.
I think the cool part is, even in the blog post where they introduced this, which was beforehand because it's already in preview, is like the example they have is this iChat client, right? And they have the idea, which is like, oh, if I'm in development locally, use the Olama chat client. But if I'm in
Hmm.
production, use the Azure AI inference chat client, right? So it's like, okay, like what am I doing where I don't maybe want to call Azure every single time when I'm just like building and working on my application? I could use Olama, for example. And I'm just saying all these
Hmm.
words. I don't know what any of them mean, but what they are, Frank. So
I
that those
actually had to
ideas
look
help.
up Olama. It's just a way to run the Llama networks, which are
Mm.
a whole family of models locally and maybe in the cloud. It's very confusing. They need a better website.
But also
But
there are those lower lying things too. Like I think the cool part is like a lot of things are being super optimized with like the tensors and the tokenizers as well,
well,
right? So they're kind of like underneath the hood, things are
and
happening.
also we were talking about. I'm sorry, it's slipping my mind that Python integration library with .NET.
Mm,
So if you just have a model that you can execute in Python, you could always just use that library, use this interface. So that's another easy way to run these things just locally.
yeah,
Download the model, get it running in Python, interface with the Python. However, use
boom.
that library. That looks like the easiest way.
Yeah. So all sorts of good stuff. What was the next thing you watched, Frank?
Next thing, I had to dive into the Maui real quick, but honestly, I skipped through it quickly. I just wanted to see the presenters because they're always my favorite people. You know,
Yeah.
I have my sessions because they're things I want to know, and I have my sessions because they're my favorite people. So had to go see my friends real quick and check out the Maui stuff. Honestly, I don't remember. Collection View got some kind of crazy performance thing that you have to opt into. Didn't
Yep.
fully understand it, but I like performance. And
Yeah.
I've made fun of Collection View a lot in the past. So I'm definitely going to give the new Collection View thinger a try.
Yeah, so there's all sorts of goodies. Obviously, yeah. Well, it's great. It's like, yeah, me, John, and Rachel are all in right now. If you're listening to this, we're all in Orlando currently. Although I'm not there right now. We'll be there doing workshops, keynotes, and Maui session there as well. Rachel and I are, and yeah, there's all sorts of new stuff. So yeah, Collection View and Carousel View on iOS and Mac Catalyst specifically, they those were those were apparently, so I didn't really know, but apparently Collection View has like multiple sort of APIs that you can use. And I
Okay.
think they were using like V1, like older APIs. Like I think there's newer options you can opt into that are only available on newer operating systems type of thing. You know what I
Oh,
mean? So they
even
basically
in the
rewrote a whole new handler from scratch using the newer, hottest, latest APIs from Apple.
right, and even those Apple will replace in a year. So
Yeah.
even if you're writing at Apple most native level, Swift or Objective C, Collection View has changed dramatically at least three times in its own lifetime,
Yeah.
and so it's a lot of fun keeping up with
Yeah.
Apple.
Yeah, there's a
I know
bunch
there
of
were better improvements there, and I apologize, David and Maddie. I really did pay attention for a few minutes, but there's a good blog out there. Um, and any other big headlines for that one?
for Maui stuff. Okay, so there's several stuff. I mean,
Oh,
obviously there's tons of performance things across the board. A lot of native AOT stuff. Peppers had an
I
entire
did want to
performance.
mention
That
that.
was cool. Is tons of the Xamarin folks came back. So I saw like John Dick. I saw
Yeah,
Peppers. Like I was just like, it was really cool on campus. A lot of people. There's a new title bar integration, especially which is great for desktop applications, especially on Windows integrated. But you can put the title bar anywhere, which is really cool. They integrated some new lifecycle events. They enhanced keyboard input. They added some other features, for example, with like Android asset packs. If you have like really large like files you need to do. One thing that's fascinating for you is they have a command line tool. It's a .NET Global tool. It's called XC Sync, Xcode Sync, which enables you to synchronize your asset catalogs, plist, storyboards, and nibs back and forth via CLI or through VS Code from the .NET world and the Xcode world, which is kind of rad. I mean, that was something that Visual Studio for Mac did,
yeah,
and now it just kind of is out there as a global tool, so you can use it a lot more freer, which is really nice, and it's open source. So that's kind of cool.
yeah. I do love this. I wish they had built it in as like a built-in task because I'm now
Mm,
just going to have to copy and paste this snippet into every single one of my apps. But good enough. I will take it. For
yeah, I
those
think
who
in
don't know, sorry. Yeah.
in VS Code, it is like a command that you can do.
Okay.
But yeah, if
Great.
it's
Yeah.
command line, then you got to like run the command line stuff. Yeah, but it is some of the the palette commands are there in VS Code, which is kind of cool.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you've done iOS programming, you know what I'm talking about. Storyboards, you're doing a bunch of code generation. It's a pain.
Yeah.
To the point where I just do my best not to use storyboards or zibs anymore. But that main menu still has to be a zib. It's terrible.
Yeah. We also
I do want to
talked
mention
about Sync Fusion already, so that we did a whole podcast on that, and that was
Yeah,
like a main
exactly.
focus with the new templates as well that David showed.
We did a
so
good run up to this. I do want to mention the native AOT. It's officially supported on iOS. I'm going to give it a whirl. I do want to do a podcast at some point.
Yeah.
And I'm probably not going to make any friends, but I'm going to call it Xamarin LLVM AOT versus native AOT, because I am curious what the performance difference is. Because if you've been listening to this podcast at all, you know I always rave about the LLVM AOT performance. It's a slow build. It takes forever.
Yeah.
But the app that pops out on the other side is super fast. And so I love it. So I'm going to be curious to see how the new native AOT stacks up against it. And every time I mention this on Twitter, and that's why I'm expecting backlash, everyone says, we didn't design it to be as fast as LLVM. I'm like, yes, but what if it could be? So
yeah.
Someday we'll do the shootout. It's nice to know it's actually officially supported. I do want to say I did the downloads. I downloaded the .NET 9.0.100 and I did the sudo .NET workload update, and I waited the 1 hour because I have terrible internet. And I got all the new toys. And then I had to wait another hour to update my Android to Android 35. But then .NET new Maui worked just fine and actually popped up really quick, especially on my very new expensive computer. I was happy once I had everything downloaded and installed. .NET worked really smoothly. So I'm happy to see Maui still working great right out of the box. I do want to complain about the default template a little bit, but otherwise great.
Okay, yeah. I think there's I actually haven't really played around with the new templates all that much, to be honest with you, which would be fascinating. I updated everything, Visual Studios, my Macs, everything like that worked pretty seamless, which is really great. So working good. All right, what did you head to next in your .NET Conf journey, Frank?
You know me, so I forget. Well, actually, I couldn't quite hear you in the beginning of your rankings, but I assume you put C# 13 at the top because that's what I love. I love languages. Honestly, C# is what got me into .NET in the first place, but I like .NET because it's a cross-language world, but still, I loved C#. So C# 13, I cheated a little bit because I listened to a podcast on C# 13 prior to this. So I was a little bit privy, and we talked about it on the podcast. I knew a lot of the features coming into it, but it's always still fun to see my favorite people, Mads, and oh my God, why is his name slipping my mind right now?
It's Dustin.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I am so sorry. It was on the tip before I said Mads. Anyway, they did a great job. I always like watching those two go through all the features. They have a real good back and forth between the two of them. A lot of performance stuff. Mostly things we've covered on the show. It was a lot of low-level performance stuff, but oddly enough, it wasn't my favorite performance session. That's for later.
Yeah.
But it was fun to see all the features and to see them work through them. I'm not sure I have a favorite feature because it was all just like such low level like span stuff. I got kind of lost in the ref structs and all that kind of stuff. But I did have an absolute favorite feature that is off by default. Wah, wah.
Okay.
Are you aware of the new field keyword?
Oh yeah, new field. Yeah.
Sorry, James. For some reason, my audio keeps cutting out. We'll blame the new Mac, but I'll just say that hopefully James's audio will come back for me. In the meantime, there's a new keyword called field. And if you create an auto property, that's like when you create a property, you just have get and set, and you just let the compiler create that field for you. Life was good. Life was easy. But then what if you wanted to do something in that set method? And you would have to go create a real backing property or a backing field for your property. And then you would have to do everything by hand. And it was really terrible. And so there was a real like penalty for having for doing anything in your setter. Like, I'm like, oh God, I have to go create a whole nother thing. Nowadays with the co-pilots and refactoring, it's pretty easy, but I still never wanted to do it. Well, there's going to be a new keyword called field, probably, if people don't come at them with pitchforks, because it is a word that others use throughout our code. And that'll be a way to just refer to the backing field in any of your property accessors that you declare, even though you're using an auto property. Nuts and bolts of it is, it's going to make property change notifications easier. It's going to make writing little setters easier without actually having to go duplicate the type and the name and put an underscore on it or something silly like that. So I'm super excited for the new field keyword. I think it's going to clean up actually a lot of my code because I hate backing fields. But sadly, they know it is an identifier that people use. They're a little bit afraid of just turning it on right away. So they're going to turn on diagnostic for C# 13. And I think you'll be able to opt into the feature, but I'm a little confused there. But they promise it'll be in C# 14. But I like it. It's one of those little niceties that just makes life better.
Yeah. I think that I agree. I think that with C# 13, the interesting part with C# is that it's a very mature language, right? Like, especially in the last several years, like C#'s gotten like tons of new features and a lot of like, 7, 8, 9, like all of these, like there was like so much goodness like wrapped into there that even still like I'm really modernizing my code. I think C# 10 was like a really big, and 11 was a big jump. Yeah, I think with 13, what I've noticed, at least, especially watching like Tobe session, other sessions, is a lot of the things that they ended up adding into this really specifically. There are some niceties for developers, but it really is like low level library creators and .NET itself, right? So like actually stuff like params collections and the ref struct stuff, like there's tons of these little micro optimizations that trickle all the way downstream that help boost performance because the SDK and the runtime can take advantage of these things, which is really, really neat. So that's really cool in general. So I think there's that. I will say I do like that there's a new lock object. So that's kind of nice. We get no more objects
Fancy lock
floating around the world. But yes, so that's kind of nice at least. But yeah, I think if people are like, oh, I'm looking for, a bajillion things, it's like, well, you're not maybe really going to find a bajillion things, if that makes sense.
Okay. I do want to mention one more. It's kind of on that note because it's such a refinement, but I've run into this a bunch of times with my own APIs and things like that. Are you aware of the new override priority or something like that attribute that you can add to methods?
I'm looking at it now. No, I don't think so.
Well, in C#, we can, overload priority. So in C# you can create overloads. You just have different parameter types. You can have a function with the same name, but different parameter types. And the compiler's smart. It figures out which one to call based on the arguments you passed to it, based on the types of the arguments you passed to it. This is all done at compile time. There's no performance overhead. It's all just how the lookup works. There's always been this issue in C# where you can easily have different overloads that can satisfy the argument types. And therefore, it's documented somewhere. You don't want to read it. It's hard to read. The overload resolution system for how it actually decides which one to go pick. And it's basically just the most specific one it tries to pick. But there's a lot of caveats in that because C# is an old language and they want to be backwards compatible. It's a big, strong thing. All of our code just works with the new versions. It just works with the new .NET versions because they take backwards compatibility seriously. So what are you to do? If you want to add new overloads that are maybe high performance because they use spans and ref structs and all sorts of new fancy kind of stuff, but you don't want to break backwards compatibility. But given the rules of overloads, it would never pick your new fancy method because reasons. What is one to do?
What is one to do, Frank?
You introduce a new attribute called overload priority or something like that. And you can just put an integer in there. And you are just telling the compiler, deprioritize this or maybe prioritize this. Basically, take that set of rules that you have for choosing overload resolutions, throw them out, and put this one, at the top of the list or the bottom of the list. It'll still do type compatibility. If the types don't work, it won't choose it. But you're just giving a hint to the compiler, like, really try to use this one. Do your very darndest to use this overload.
Yeah.
And that's nice because now I've run into this all the time with string join. When you give it just a bunch of random objects, it can never decide which overload, and then you have to put a little cast in to make it decide which overload to use. They fixed all that. Yeah. So now they just went through all their APIs and put in all these little priorities to prioritize the fast ones because everyone loves speed. And then, that's it. They prioritize the fast ones and the modern ones, I should say.
Yeah.
The ones you want it to be calling. Yeah. So I thought that was such a little thing, but it really, when you have very mature APIs, and by mature, I mean big with lots of overloads, this is a very nice thing to have for migrating your users to new APIs.
Yeah, I do think that's super duper nice, and that again, the underlying system is already integrating these things across the board, which I think is really, really neat to see. That's for sure. Yeah. All right. So you jumped to C# 13. Where did you jump next to, Frank?
Staying on brand, performance. Got to stick with the performance. This one I did not expect to like. So I said I have my favorite sessions. I have my favorite performers, actors, stars, celebrities. Let's go with celebrities. I have my favorite celebrities. This time I decided to go to a Tobe talk. Yeah. Tobe talk performance. And I did not mean to spend any time at the Tobe talk, but I just got entranced because it was all. Do you remember we did an episode on, what was it, the 1 billion row challenge or something like that? How fast can you parse this big file of just stupid data? It was just a silly contest. It wasn't even a contest. Challenge. They've introduced via all that ref struct span stuff that I kind of glazed over in the C# 13 talk. Turns out the API people actually paid attention to all that, and it turns out there was collaboration and all that too, and introduced a whole bunch of APIs, especially what do we do as programmers? We parse strings and we do network calls, and sometimes we do some UI work. That's all we do. So they made parsing strings so much faster and easier. So we've had span for a while now. It's just a quick way to access memory and pass around quick references to memory. But the APIs around them have always been a little bit lacking. But now we have a lot of new fancy features via improvements to the C# language, where you can now actually pass these like span types and these ref struct
Yeah.
types as generic parameters. So it
It's
actually
huge.
took a language improvement to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But because that's possible now, and because they can do overload prioritization and say, use this fast version, a lot of APIs just get dramatically faster if you just throw in a few random add spans in a few random places. This is what I got out of the talk.
True.
If you
Yeah.
want your code faster, just start putting as spans in random places until it's fast.
Yep.
But then they also introduce real nice improvements to like regex, where it just returns references to where the matches are. It doesn't do the substring call. Sorry, I have to interrupt myself with a story. I like writing compilers, and especially like Kelka in itself is just a giant compiler. And I was lamenting one day to another programmer who I really respect, and I was like, "Gosh, I've really tried to optimize the code. I've tried to make it as fast as possible, but the stupid bottleneck in the whole thing is the tokenizer. It's this part that is." It's the lowest level of the parser. It's the dumbest part of the parser. All it's doing is breaking up the string into little pieces. And I'm like, for the life of me, I just can't get that thing fast. And he's like, yeah, buddy. Well, A, if your bottleneck is your tokenizer, then you wrote a good compiler. So got a compliment.
Nice.
But B, also, that's always the bottleneck in every compiler. Like it's the low-level string handling. That's you can make the fastest algorithms on the planet, but eventually you just have to read a lot of memory. Long story short, I'm always interested in easy ways to access memory and parse strings fast. So if you looked at my code for the 1 billion row challenge, I wrote some nasty code. I got it to be fast, but it was some nasty code. I feel like with these new APIs, I could probably in 5 or 6 lines of code get within, an order of magnitude of where I was at, because these new APIs are just, they're stupid. They don't touch memory at all, and they're just blasting through memory as fast as.
Yeah.
And some of it's vectorized. There's this weird search values thing. Whatever, it's crazy.
Yeah. No, there's all sorts of crazy stuff, and the thing that is really fascinating too is that there's the new GC is now just on by default, the adaptive GC, which is crazy. And because there's like a workstation and a server GC, and they have different implementations for the different requirements, but they basically made these huge changes to how the server GC works with this adaptive memory. As opposed to like resources like memory and CPU available. And so like on these high core machines where application memory is like small and, and it can be dramatic over time, like it basically is able to dramatically lower the memory usage with higher throughput. So like they ran these benchmarks on Tech and Power, right? So like with a minimal API that's doing JSON benchmarkings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is on like an Intel 56 core Linux benchmark. I'm looking at it now. So nice and .NET 8, 1.5 million requests per second, which is a lot. They've now increased that to over 1.7 million requests per second. So 15% increase. The big game change is with this new server GC adaptive memory requirement. Is previously for those calls, for that test to run, it would take about 1.6 gigs of memory.
Not bad, given that you're doing some absurd number of clients per second.
The memory is now reduced by 93%, under 150 megabytes.
That's great.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? So like again, there's no changes to it. It's like when you're doing this crazy amount of throughput and bandwidth on these super high core count machines, like it just is wild. So like there's tons of links to like low level stuff. Again, there's a lot of low level stuff. I think that's a cool thing about performance is like you just upgrade and like a lot of this stuff just happens. You know what I mean? For you, or you throw in some spans, right, and do some other things. But for the most part, it's like it's there. Like they optimize link, right? They're just like, oh, now take and default if empty are just like 10 times
Oh
faster.
yeah.
There's 10
Yeah.
times faster. You're welcome. You know what I mean? Like system text JSON. Oh, it's 50% faster. You know what I mean? Just like for certain calls that you're already doing, you don't have to change anything. It's just like, it's faster. But it's like top to bottom, right? Which is cool.
And it wasn't all performance too. There was sorry, my mind was wandering because you just reminded me of a fun one. What was Rich Lander's talk called?
That's what's
It's
new
just
in
like .NET
runtime,
library stuff.
SDK, and libraries.
Sorry, terrible audio. No, James is cut out again, so I'm just going to keep going on as if James was here.
Wow.
So in the wonderful .NET stuff update talk, it was just a nice overview of improvements to the library. So, these are just new functions, new classes, go things to explore, find a blog on it. I can't remember half of them. There's just a bunch of stuff. But one of my favorite things that was announced, have you ever been in this situation where you have a whole bunch of tasks like capital T, tasks, things that you actually want to execute, and you just need to wait until they're all done? But wouldn't it be nice if you could update the UI a little bit as they're being done? This happens to me all the time. And I've come up with silly ways to do it. Like I put them into an array and then I create a loop around that array and then I put a few sleeps in there and I feel terrible about all of that code. It's terrible. So there is like a task. What is it? It's like a wait all or when all or something like that. But that waits until everything is done.
Yeah.
Now you can get an async enumerable, which is crazy. I don't use these things enough. You can get an async enumerable, which will just one at a time as these tasks complete will notify you. And the overall thing, the enumerable, will finish when they're all done. It's such a small little thing, but like I've created some terrible code because I didn't have that. And I'm not going to go rewrite that code because it's terrible and I'm afraid to touch it. But from now on, I am using this. I'm using this in a lot of different places because this is nice and I'm excited for it.
That's cool. Well, I'm glad you watched that talk. I'm glad Emo and Rich had that talk. It was just super cool. Yeah. All right. Where did you head? You went from performance to runtime, library, SDKs. Where was next on the Frank crew? You really got a lot of conference in. I'm very impressed.
Well, I'm just kidding. That's the end. That's what I'm up to so far. There's always more talks. Like I didn't even know about the adaptive GC thing. So I skipped through a lot of the talks, and there's parts I'm going to go back to and all of that. There's whole AI talks that I've skipped that I want to go back through because, well, honestly, there were a lot of AI talks, so that's why I had to skip them. So I saved those for the end. I wanted to make sure I got through all the .NET stuff. And it was important for me to actually download it and play with it a little bit too. So that's why I wanted to do those talks so I knew what to play with.
Yeah.
I needed someone to tell me what's cool. And that's what they're for.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. I mean, there's obviously tons of other things too. ASP.NET Core and Blazor, tons of performance improvements. There's like some nice new improvements to the API in Blazor, so you know when things are happening, if they're interactive or not, or when things are waiting. There's like some new APIs. They actually, for web developers, one of the big thing is this static files optimizations. So if you have a bunch of JavaScript or CSS, basically every web app in the world, right? Yeah. They now optimize these files during build and publish, and they do like static web assets on them, and they generate fingerprinted versions. So like they'll never have to be downloaded again. They're super duper fast and minified and all this stuff.
Nice.
So like the compression uses Brotli compression, which is super cool. They made big changes to Open API, not to be confused with Open AI, but Open API. Back in the day, we had just like Swagger and Swagger definitions, which used Open API. The team changed this. So before, instead of opting you into Swagger and Swagger UI automatically by default, like that entire ecosystem has evolved. So one of the things that Safia talked about is she talked about how they basically did a lot of work to give you new built-in support for Open API document generation. And through your APIs, it'll extract all your metadata. So now you are in control more than ever of what you tools and services and things you want to integrate into. And you can use all these different tools that are out there, and it's all native AOT friendly, and it's all super duper nice, which is really, really cool. And she showed us really cool tooling and exporting and all these really nice things, which was nice.
And you just totally jogged my memory about something I did want to mention. Emo was demoing. It's such a small thing. Sorry, I love small things. The new JSON converter, whatever, system.text.json.
STJ.
STJ. Is that what the cool kids call it?
Yes.
A cool kid. Okay. Well, STJ can now output schemas, and it's ridiculous. But where's this been all my life? Does New and Soft do this? I need to check on that, because for years I have just been serializing random object graphs, and every so often I'll open them in an editor and be like, "Yep, that looks like JSON." On worst days, I actually have to hand edit them. Like, they're meant to be human edited files, and I should be inputting them. And then you're looking at the code and trying to remember how the file works, and you're looking at the code and you're trying to remember how JSON works. You can't have a comma at the end because they don't allow that.
Yeah.
It's so stupid. Well, the STJ can now just output a schema file. You can put a little $ schema at the top of your JSON file, and all of a sudden IDEs like VS Code light up and give you type checking and IntelliSense on your JSON files.
Nice.
Now.
That's cool.
So if you are doing any JSON serialization, I highly recommend you output all the schemas, just tuck them away in your little dev folder, and then you can reference them. So if you ever have to hand edit them, you just get way better tooling for JSON.
Nice. That's neat. That's cool.
Small but cool, right? It's
small
just
but cool. A few other things over here. So there's some really cool things with WPF and WinForms. So WPF got a new mode that you can opt into, like Fluent UI, like modern UI. So it'll automatically do light theme and dark theme for your WPF. WinForms got a dark mode as well, modern icons, all this stuff, which is really cool. Also, they improved async APIs with control invoke async. So before you could only do invoke. So like a lot of new async stuff, which is really neat. So, and of course, new like native. Wild. Yeah, it's wild. Like there's a whole great session with Marie and Klaus, which is cool. And then native AOT support for WinUI 3. So for Windows developers, which I am one, no matter what you're building with, lots of cool updates. And finally, really quick, Frank, there were amazing, you got to watch this stuff. There was amazing sessions on not only what's new in Visual Studio Code. There was 2 different sessions on those, but also on all the crazy, awesome new GitHub Copilot features that are not only in Visual Studio Code, but in Visual Studio 2022. And like, it is wild. It is like, I was watching the what's new in 2022, both for like just what's new and then also in Copilot. I ran over to the presenters, the 2 of them, and I was like, oh my God, your session was so amazing. It was cool. It was like really good. It was like so neat. I was blown away.
I have to tell you, I'm really excited because I set up this new machine and I put Windows on it. And I was like, well, what's Windows without Visual Studio? And I put the newest Visual Studio on it because, I mean, it's .NET week.
Yeah.
And boy, that took forever. I think it took all night, but it finished. And I am really actually excited because I haven't had a new Visual Studio to play with in a while. It's probably been a couple years since I spent some good time in it. And so I'm really excited that you told me you're telling me to go check out this video, because I do have a new toy to play with. And like I said, I can't wait for someone to tell me how to play with the new toy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, go out there, go watch the keynote, go see me walk on a bridge, and the amazing presenters. I didn't do any of the hard work. Everyone else did all the hard work. It was really cool to work with so many awesome people, on this stuff. I love it. So I'm excited to see what .NET 10 brings next year, but, I'm ready to only dive into .NET 9 for the next year. That's for sure.
Wait,
what?
Is there a preview release of .NET 10 yet?
No. It'd be like February. So you got 3 months. So, well, let's do a quick one here. We'll do a little recap because I just got a gift in the mail, Frank Krueger, and it is a Mac Mini.
Fantastic.
Mini.
Are
Haven't
we
even
all
opened
going
it
to
yet.
witness an unboxing? Are we going to be treated to an unboxing?
I guess we can. Okay, so all right. So I did open it from the box. I was on with my buddy Craig and Dave earlier, and we opened the box. It literally just came an hour ago. So this is, you can
That's
see that it's
fantastic.
still got the green seal on it. You already got yours, and you're using it right now,
Yep.
which is cool.
I should say we got lucky. Apple did pre-orders for these computers, and it sounded like we weren't going to get them until the next millennium or something like that. Yeah.
December.
But then we got lucky, and they just kind of showed up in the mail. Yours got a little wait in Kentucky, I believe, but that's
it did. it went Shenzhen to Hong Kong to Alaska to Kentucky to Portland to where I live.
Okay.
So, another thing before I open this, I got a new Apple Watch, Frank.
Oh my goodness, you're spending all the money. That's a beautiful band. I like it.
This is a Apple Watch SE2. It was on sale for $200 at Best Buy. Thanks, Best Buy, not sponsor the podcast. And I'll tell you why. I said I was going to keep my Series 3 until it died. And on Saturday, Frank, I had my watch on, worked in the morning. I went out for a walk later in the day, went to go start a walk. The touchscreen stopped working completely. 100%. Rebooted it. Done. Nothing. I don't know what happened, but it done. And once your touchscreen stops working, you can't do anything. You can't do anything at all. It's impossible. I sent it back to Apple. Yeah. The trade-in. Guess how much money they gave me for it?
I hope they charged you.
They charged $0 and they offered to recycle it for me for free. So
that's very kind. Okay. I think you made out there they could have charged you.
They should have charged me. I sent it in and it was good. I had to wait for the battery to die though, because I couldn't turn it off because I reformatted it. And there's no way to turn it off. You can only reboot it. It's hilarious. So then for a whole day, all of our iPhones just were like, do you want to pair this Apple Watch? Do you want to pair this Apple Watch? And I was like, no, I don't want to pair this Apple Watch. Anyway, so then we got
the unboxing going. We've got one label off.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy the card? Ooh, that's a good one.
That was nice. Did you hear that?
Nice.
Yeah, that's good.
I shouldn't have talked over it. I think the cardboard box was more impressive. More of a magic trick than this one.
This type of box that they have, and these little peels. It's the same on the Apple Watch. It's the same on the new Apple Watches. Is how they have it.
How mini is the mini going to be, everyone?
Oh, that's kind of cool. Wow, that's a nice box. Wow. Yeah, I was telling Craig, he's like, is that the small one? He's like, it must be. Oh, that is really the box is surprisingly large. And that is a optical illusion there.
Yeah,
wow.
Well,
it's so
premium
small.
device, they wanted to make it look bigger. It's like a ring, a nice big box for the ring.
I watched this week someone tear it apart. I watched a teardown. This is the size of my phone. My phone is taller than this thing. This is wild. Wow. This is impressive. This is very small. This is a whole computer right there.
I love it.
Wow.
It's a beautiful computer, but I am just going to put it in a little stand. I like the cable too. The cable is
braided.
A knit. Yeah.
Yeah. Braided knit. That's nice.
Build a cute little stand for my cute little computer. I might try to find a cute little 7-inch screen for the cute little 7-inch computer.
If you find, everyone seems to be buying these. Let me know if you find one that you like. I think a touchscreen, something a little 7-inch. That's what everyone's saying that you should buy. It's this new thing that the kids are doing. Okay, so here's what's really cool. If you're watching this on YouTube, and if you're not, you can go there now. You can basically see where this is at. Mm-hmm. You know where the ports are at?
Where the ports are.
Everything above the ports, that is the power supply. This is 1/2 power supply. The power supply is on the top. and it's like it's huge. It's ginormous. They didn't have to do that. They could have. They didn't have. They didn't have to
Right.
do this. This is
Right.
it's
Absurd
almost
and beautiful.
it's almost inappropriate that they shoved it in here, but that's very impressive
Yeah.
that they did that.
I did
Wow.
get to see some of the teardowns, and they were pretty lovely. It's a very tiny
Wild.
computer put in a very tiny box. I like that the hard drive is indeed removable, and yet it's
Yes.
an Apple proprietary drive. So maybe in the future we can swap drives, but that's about it.
Yeah. Maybe. Oh, also, hold on. What's that? Apple keyboard with Touch ID.
We have turned into a full Apple podcast.
Wow.
James is now showing a brand new Apple keyboard. Wow, you splurge, sir.
I have one more unboxing. This is a Anchor. Our friends at Anchor sent this to me for $10 on Amazon.
They charged you again?
They charged me again.
I think you're doing the
Ooh,
sponsorship incorrectly.
this is my USB-C to USB-A 4-to-1. Ooh, that's nice. Because I have a bunch of hubs that have a bunch of other stuff on them. You can't hear me. I can hear you still, but anyways, I mean, I guess I got to wrap the pod. Anyways, it has four USBs. Oh, wow. All right, well, let's get do for USB-A's. Yes. But now I'm like, oh, should I've gotten one with? I mean, I have plenty that have HDMI out. So if I do get a little monitor or something, I guess.
Start small.
Yeah.
You don't want to clutter your desk. Yeah. So I'm just going to get the ones that let me organize the best, mostly.
Yes.
That's what I'm focusing on. Yeah.
I started here and I was like, there might be other better adapters later on. So we'll see. But all right, there we go. That's going to do for this week's Merge Conflict, people. We're going to wrap it at an hour. We're a little bit shorter than the .NET Conf keynote. Go give it a look. .NETconf.net, .NET YouTube. You'll find all the stuff. So to do for this week's Merge Conflict. Let us know what you thought. We'll be back in a few weeks. Next week, a super exclusive podcast. I sit down with John Galloway, who works on my team and has been at Microsoft for 15 years, celebratory this month. And we talk about his journey from working on a submarine to being a software engineer. So you don't want to miss that one. Subscribe on all your favorite podcast apps and onto the YouTube. You can see John's beautiful face. That's it for this week's Merge Conflict. So until next time, I'm James Montemagno.
And I'm Frank Kruger. Thanks for watching and listening.
Peace.